Hi everyone, it's Darlene. I've got a new and interesting technique for you. I'm using the Totally Trees set by Stampin' Up. This set is from the most recent holiday catalog. I'm going to use my Stamp-A-Majig for this project. So I'm going to ink up my stamp with some pigment ink. This is VersaFine Sepia. I'm using pigment just because it's easier to wipe off the stamp and wipe off my Stamp-A-Majig sheet. And so I'm going to line my block up in the upper left-hand corner of that handle, and then I'm going to stamp it down onto this sheet. And you have to be careful because you're using pigment ink. It's easy to clean up, but it also smudges because it doesn't dry very quickly. But anyway, so I can align my stamp exactly where I want it. This is a piece of Stampin' Up! Crumb Cake paper. And now I've cleaned my stamp, and now I'm inking it up with some Stampin' Up! White ink. So I've got this stamped at the bottom. You want to do this one first. Next, I'm going to do the trees, and I'm just going to put 5 of them on there. So I'm going to start with the middle one and work my way out so I know that they're all equidistant apart. You'll notice that my stamp is stained from using some Simon Says stamp ink. That's why it looks brown. Anyway, so now I'm going to stamp just the bottom. My camera turned off for a second there, so but I've got plenty of these to do. What I'm going to do is just ink up the very bottom of my tree, so just the trunk. And then I'm going to take my Stamp-A-Majig, which I've also stamped with this stamp, and I'm going to move it so that it's just a tiny little bit to the right of where the white is. And it's actually half on the white, half off the white. And that way I know exactly where I'm lining it up. And then I'm going to stamp my Simon Says Stamp dark chocolate ink. And you want to use a dye ink for this so that it soaks into the paper to the right of the white stamp. Now I noticed that my trunk kind of swerved a little bit, curved a little bit, and so it wasn't straight. So I just took a white gel pen and I colored in the left edge, and you wouldn't even know it. So I don't know how that happened, but you'll see that it happens again. I've moved in a little closer so you can see how I'm positioning this tree just to the right of the white. And now I'm going to stamp this one and this one straight, and then I got one more to do, and this one ends up being crooked. Somehow my trunk is moving on my block. But again, not a big deal. I just took my gel pen and I just colored it just to the left of that trunk. And that'll complete my 5 trees. And now I'm going to work on the ground. I'm going to double stamp this ground with some wild wasabi. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the tree trunks, in that I'm positioning my ground just to the right and a little bit down from my original white stamp. And I've inked up my stamp with some wild wasabi, and I'm stamping it down. So you'll see you have the original white stamp at the top, and then you have the wasabi on white in the middle, and then you have the wasabi soaked into the crumb cake at the bottom. Next, I'm going to work on my trees, and this is when it's going to get fun. So I'm going to take some real red ink, and I've inked up my stamp. This is the solid stamp, and I'm going to roll it on the left-hand side, and you can see, because it's clear, what's being rolled. I'm doing this nice and slowly to just do the left edge and a little bit of the top. And I also stamped this stamp onto my Stamp-A-Majig, and you're going to center it right in the middle of the white stamp. And I'm going to stamp it down, and you can see where it stamps off. It's a lighter color. It does leave a little bit of a harsh line where I stamped it off, so I'm just going to take an aqua painter and kind of blend it a little bit. It turns some pink, and so it kind of makes it into a gradual transition from white to red. I'm going to do the same thing on all of these. So my next one is wild wasabi. I'm going to show you this stamping off. I've already inked up my stamp, and I'm going to start on the bottom, then I'll roll it up until it hits the top. And then I'm going to position my Stamp-A-Majig exactly on top of the stamp, so we're not moving it off to the side at all. And then I'm going to blend it with an aqua painter to get rid of that harsh line. And you can see on the right-hand side where it's not stamped off and it's not on the white, that you're seeing it soaked into the crumb cakes with a much darker color. So when I did my pumpkin pie here, I felt like I didn't stamp off enough color. So I tried it again to see how it would work, and then I ended up stamping off on the right and it didn't work. So anyway, the point of this is to tell you that you can always start over. So I re-inked up my stamp, and now I'm rolling it. This is very similar to the rock and roll technique. If you remember that, that's kind of an old technique. So anyway, I'm going to stamp this down, and then again with the aqua painter. And I'm using some fall colors here. So I've got pinks, purples, and greens, yellows. This is crushed curry, so it's a little bit more of a darker yellow, not like the Daffodil Delight. This has more of a brownish in it. You can see this is a very juicy ink pad. It's kind of new to me. And because of that, it kind of stamped a little bit weird, but that's okay because I have my aqua painter and I'm gonna blend that out so you won't really even notice it. And then finally for my last tree, I'm using Rich Razzleberry, which is kind of a purplish red. And this one also is extremely juicy. So I'm gonna stamp off carefully. And you can see as I lift it up, it kind of splatters a little bit because it's so juicy. But anyway, I'm gonna stamp it down and I'm gonna get that line again. I'm not sure why I'm getting that line when it's a juicy ink pad, but if your ink pads are dry, it actually works better. Anyway, so I'm just gonna blend that in, and that's it for coloring these trees. I absolutely love the way these turned out with the white on the left and then blending it in to sort of create that whitish color in between. I'm gonna put some splatters here. I'm using my Gansai Tambi white palette. I want my splatters to be really thick, like heavy with paint, and also small. So to accomplish that, I'm gonna use quite a bit of water, but I'm gonna work it in for a pretty long time so that I get a thick paint on my brush. So when I tap it, it's so thick, it's just gonna leave very tiny, tiny, tiny dots, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm gonna add my sentiment just underneath my trees. I'm using this Avery Elle set. It's got a really beautiful font to it, and the sentiment is nice and long. So I'm gonna put it in my Misty, and I'm gonna use that same dark chocolate ink by Simon Says Stamp. And when I stamp this down, unfortunately, I don't know if you can tell when I open this up here, but everything is kind of smushed, smudged on the thankful word. And I'm trying to figure out why it would do that. And then I look at the stamp and it turns out that there is a piece of a baby wipe in there. So that is why you should always use your absorber. I'm going to use the typical fix here, which is to stamp it again on some more crumb cake cardstock. And this time it's stamped just fine, and I'm going to trim it out and put it on top so you can see what this looks like. And actually, you know what? I think I like it better with the raised sentiment on top. I've also cut a couple of pieces of early espresso to put as a border. So I'm going to put the ATG on the back of my tree panel, and then I'll just sort of lay it on top of these strips so that I can control exactly how much of the espresso is showing. So I'm going to do that for the top, and then I'll do the same thing for the bottom. I just felt like I needed a little bit more of an outline, and that sort of brings out the shadows in the trees. And I put some Scotch foam tape on my sentiment and put it right there over the other one. And then I'll take this and put some ATG tape runner on the back and adhere it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch Neenah Solar White, and that brings out the white in the trees. So I really love the way this card came together. I love this technique, and this stamp set is a great versatile stamp set too. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.